The Caribbean Sea, once tranquil, now churns with the presence of U.S. warships, destroyers, combat ships, and Coast Guard cutters. Their gray hulls cut through blue waters, a stark symbol of American military might. Officially, their mission is to combat drug trafficking, but their proximity to Venezuela sends a far more charged message. On board, sailors and Marines operate with precision, radars sweeping the horizon, surveillance planes circling above. Every move is calculated, every signal encrypted, a show of force impossible to ignore. For local fishermen and commercial ships, these warships are a sobering reminder of deep geopolitical rifts. On Venezuela's shores, the view is one of imminent threat. President Maduro's government sees these ships as instruments of intimidation, not partners. Caracas denounces the deployment as aggression, fueling a narrative of national defense and resistance. The psychological pressure is immense. Every U.S. action is scrutinized, every Venezuelan response weighed for escalation. The world watches, knowing a single misstep could have devastating consequences. The Caribbean's warm waters have become a cold theater of conflict. Tension hums from the decks of warships to the streets of Caracas and Washington. This is more than a naval operation, it's a crisis in the making. The standoff is silent, but the stakes are deafening. The region holds its breath, waiting for what comes next. The balance of power teeters on the waves. The U.S. and Venezuela were once close, bound by oil and mutual interests. American companies helped develop Venezuela's vast reserves, making it a key supplier to the U.S. But resentment simmered beneath the surface, seen as an unequal partnership by many Venezuelans. The election of Hugo Chavez in 1998 changed everything. Chavez's Bolivarian revolution nationalized industries, targeted U.S. assets, and forged alliances with American adversaries. Washington saw Chavez as a destabilizing force, ending decades of cooperation. After Chavez's death, Nicolas Maduro inherited a nation in crisis, plummeting oil prices, economic collapse, and mass exodus. The U.S. responded with escalating sanctions, aiming to force Maduro out. Instead, sanctions deepened Venezuela's humanitarian crisis. In 2019, the U.S. recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido, creating rival claims to the presidency. For Maduro, the U.S. is orchestrating a coup. For Washington, Maduro is an illegitimate dictator. 2 decades of conflict fueled by oil, ideology, and mistrust have led to today's explosive standoff. Simple solutions are impossible. The past haunts every move in the present. Each side sees the other as the root of Venezuela's suffering. The crisis is as much about history as it is about power. The naval deployment is just the latest chapter. The wounds run deep, and the stakes are higher than ever. Trust is a casualty, and compromise seems out of reach. The U.S. calls its mission the Enhanced Counter-Narcotics Operations. Announced in 2020, it's the largest regional deployment in decades. The goal: disrupt cocaine trafficking from South America to the U.S. The fleet includes Navy destroyers, littoral combat ships, and Coast Guard cutters. Air support comes from P-8 Poseidon surveillance planes and E-3 Sentry Command aircraft. The Pentagon claims corrupt Venezuelan officials profit from the drug trade. In 2020, the U.S. indicted Maduro and top officials for narco-terrorism. Washington argues the deployment is law enforcement, cutting off a key revenue stream for Maduro's regime. But the timing and scale raise questions. Why now, after decades of drug trafficking? Critics say the operation is a cover for political pressure, positioning U.S. forces near Venezuela's coast. It's a show of resolve, keeping military options open. The fleet is both a tool of coercion and a warning. Surveillance and intelligence gathering intensify. For Maduro, it's a threat. For Washington, leverage. The operation blurs the line between law enforcement and power projection. The message: the U.S. is watching and ready. The Caribbean is now a chessboard. Every move is strategic, every signal deliberate. The standoff grows more complex with each passing day. Confronted by U.S. warships, Maduro's government responds with defiance. He condemns the deployment as imperialist aggression, rallying his base and military. The message: Venezuela is under siege and unity is survival. The military is on high alert, conducting exercises and showcasing Russian and Chinese weaponry. Anti-ship missiles, fighter jets, and naval maneuvers signal readiness. Venezuela can't match U.S. power but aims to raise the cost of intervention. International allies bolster Maduro's stance. Russia sends warships and bombers, complicating U.S. plans. China offers economic and diplomatic support, calling for dialogue. Iran ships fuel, defying U.S. sanctions. Maduro also wages an information war, highlighting the humanitarian cost of sanctions. State media and international forums portray the U.S. as a bully. The goal wins sympathy abroad and paint the naval operation as a blockade. It's a battle for hearts and minds, not just territory. The standoff is as much about perception as firepower. Maduro's strategy: survive, resist, and shift blame. The crisis becomes a rallying cry for sovereignty. The world watches as Venezuela digs in. The standoff is both military and psychological. The U.S. naval presence is about more than drugs. It's about power. The Caribbean has long been America's backyard, but now Russia and China are encroaching. Russia backs Venezuela with loans, weapons, and political support, challenging U.S. dominance. China, Venezuela's largest creditor, wields immense economic leverage. The U.S. sees both as threats to its influence. The fleet is a response to this great power rivalry. Venezuela is now a proxy battleground in a global chess match. The crisis is about the future of American primacy in the hemisphere. The stakes are far higher than they appear. Every move is watched by rivals and allies alike. The outcome will shape the region's balance of power. Venezuela's fate is now tied to global ambitions. The U.S.-Venezuela standoff ripples across Latin America. Colombia, hosting millions of Venezuelan refugees, supports U.S. pressure, hoping for regime change. Brazil aligns with Washington but is wary of conflict. The refugee crisis strains both countries, making stability urgent. Smaller Caribbean nations, some tied to Venezuela by oil, are caught in the middle, dependent on U.S. trade but wary of intervention. Regional organizations like the OAS are divided, unable to act decisively. The lack of unity leaves the U.S. to take the lead. Neighbors are not just spectators, they're deeply affected. Escalation could destabilize the entire region. The stakes extend far beyond Venezuela's borders. Globally, the Venezuelan crisis exposes deep divisions. At the UN, the Security Council is paralyzed. US and Europe push for action, Russia and China block it. The UN is limited to humanitarian aid, unable to enforce change. Europe recognizes Guaido and sanctions Maduro's regime, but prefers diplomacy over force. The international response is fragmented, a patchwork of interests and alliances. For some, it's a fight against dictatorship. For others, it's US overreach. This lack of consensus gives both Washington and Caracas room to maneuver. The US acts with willing partners. Bypassing the UN, Maduro claims legitimacy through support from Russia and China. The crisis becomes a global contest of narratives. Each side finds allies but no solution. The world's divisions mirror those in Venezuela. The stalemate persists with no end in sight. The standoff is fueled by domestic politics on both sides. In Washington, a tough stance on Venezuela appeals to key voters, especially in Florida. Deploying warships projects strength and wins political points. The narrative of fighting narco-terrorism simplifies a complex crisis. In Caracas, Maduro uses the U.S. threat to rally support and shift blame for Venezuela's woes. The military presence helps him silence dissent and tighten control. Ordinary Venezuelans are trapped between failed leadership and foreign pressure. Both governments use the crisis for political gain. The people pay the price as solutions slip further away. The standoff is as much about politics as policy. In this standoff, victory is elusive. The U.S. seeks regime change or at least disruption of drug routes, projecting power in its hemisphere. For Maduro, survival is victory. Every day in power is a win. Russia and China gain by challenging U.S. dominance at low cost. The biggest losers are the Venezuelan people, suffering economic collapse, shortages, and mass exodus. Sanctions worsen their plight, and hopes for peace fade. The crisis traps millions between oppression and outside pressure. Military escalation would be catastrophic for all. Only a peaceful, Venezuelan-led solution offers hope. Until then, the tragedy deepens and victories ring hollow.